Hello everyone. My name is Elise. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing so good today. We are here to do my last anticipated releases video for the year. I always do 3 of these a year and I take 4-month chunks of releases. We're doing releases for 2026. These are going to be anticipated releases for me that are coming out from January through the end of April in 2026. I have 24 books to talk to you about today, so we're going to try and make this video manageable. And like I did last year, I'm going to continue on with just sharing books that are from independent presses. That has mostly shifted for me, not because there aren't big 5 releases that I'm excited about. I am, but there are so many good independent releases that are coming out. I have more than enough to make a video of that in and of itself. And the big 5 releases you're probably going to hear about other places anyway, so I don't really need to be putting them on your radar. So I feel like this is just a better use of our time together. So these are all from independent presses. So 24 books to get on your radar. Let's go ahead and dive into them. I have my laptop down below, so if you see me looking down, it's because I'm not going to memorize all these blurbs. There's no way in hell. So we're going to start with the January releases. Starting January 13th, we have a book from Atlantic Monthly Press, which is an imprint of Grove, and it is a very seasonal book. It's called Winter, The Story of a Season by Val McDermid. I have never read Val McDermid before, although I know she is quite prolific and a lot of people love her. There is one other book that I have on my TBR from her, but I honestly don't even remember what it is. So Winter is creative nonfiction that centers in on one winter in the author's life, and winter is her favorite season. So she's just talking about this one winter for her, lots of like community traditions, how she's enjoying her time. And this just seems like exactly the type of thing that I need. So I have had a struggling relationship with wintertime for many a year now, but year over year recently, I've been trying to really invest in enjoying winter to the fullest. I am definitely a summer gal. I love summer. It's my favorite season, but I'm trying to enjoy winter more and more. So I think this could be a really good book for me to get a different perspective of someone who loves winter and is finding all these things to enjoy about the season. So I want to pick it up mainly for that reason, but it also just sounds like very cozy. The cover is beautiful, sounds great, and like a good book for me personally. Other thing to note is this author is Scottish, so I believe it's taking place in Scotland during the winter, which is such a wintry place in my mind. So yeah, I think it could be a good fit. Then we're going to go over to another Grove book, but this is coming out under their Roxane Gay imprint, which I think is just called Roxane Gay Books. And this cover is amazing. It is The Hitch by Sara Levine. It's also coming out on January 13th. And I know I will be reading this book in 2026 because it is going to be a buddy read for me and one of my friends. So I will definitely be getting to this one. The premise of this just sounds absolutely chaotic, and I love that. The premise is that we have our main character, what is her name? Rose, and she is going to watch her nephew for I think like a full week. And during that time, Rose's dog, who's a Newfoundland, very big dog, attacks and kills a corgi. And Rose believes that the corgi spirit has entered into her nephew and that she needs to exorcise the corgi spirit out of her nephew. All of this happening while her sister is away internationally. And I think this is going to be not just about like familial relationships, but like when family oversteps boundaries, right? Like this is an extreme thing that Rose is doing to a child that is not her own child. And just like wild, crazy, bizarre. It's supposed to be really humorous as well. So I think this could be a really good fit for me. Hence why I'm doing it as a buddy read next year, but really excited about this one. So that is The Hitch. Then we're going over to McNally editions. I will say This video is going to be filled with McNally editions, and I cut a couple out. There's so many that I'm interested in from McNally just in the first 4 months of the year. McNally and other press are the ones this year that I'm like, ooh, I want to read all of the books that they're coming out with. So you'll see a lot from other press as well. So back to McNally. This one coming out January 13th as well. It's called A Domestic Animal by Frances King. And it does have a foreword by Rumaan Alam, if that interests you. I have read and loved Rumaan Alam, so I will be interested in reading the foreword. This book, we're following Antonio, who's an Italian philosopher in his 30s, who leaves his wife and children behind to go on a 1-year artist residency and research fellowship in England. So going to a different country. And Antonio is very handsome, very charming, and he knows it and uses that to his advantage. So while he is away, he meets Dick Thompson, who falls under his spell, and Dick finds himself desperately, passionately in love with Antonio. And that, I think, throws their life into chaos because Antonio is very manipulative. So that's the setup. But the other thing about this novel, which McNally Editions reissues books. So this book originally came out 3 years after homosexuality was decriminalized in the UK. And I think that context is also very important when thinking about the blurb. So I'm really excited to read this. I love McNally Editions. They do such a good job of curating older books that I would not be aware of. So really excited for this one. So that is A Domestic Animal. Also, the cover of this is gorgeous. Next up, we have a book from Catapult, and this one is called Second Skin by Anastasiia Fedorova, and it's coming out on February 3rd. The subtitle of this book is Inside the Worlds of Fetish, Kink, and Deviant Desire, which already sounds right up my alley. This book, genre-wise, is a little bit all over the place. So it says it's memoir, cultural criticism, reporting, erotic writing, and social history. So a lot going on in this. And I'm just gonna read some of the shorter parts of the blurb that I think give a good enough indication of what this book is gonna be talking about. It says it's a taboo-bursting personal and cultural tour through different sexual fetishes that asks, do we have the courage to look at our desires directly and express them unapologetically? Second Skin is a researched and topical book that encourages us to rethink how we see not only our own desires, but the world that creates them. It's a book about kink that I feel like doesn't exist very frequently right now. We get a lot of books that are telling fictional stories about kink and trying to normalize it in that way. And then we might get some true nonfiction that's just talking about the history of kink, or maybe giving some introductory information about kink culture. But this, I feel like, is really talking about the formation of kink, which I think is unique and not something that I've read before. So really interested in this. Hope it is something that I will find informative. So that is Second Skin. Next up, we have a Dead Ink book called A Visitation of Spirits by Randall Kenan. This is coming out on February 5th. If you're noticing, some of the release dates are on Tuesdays and some of the release dates are on Thursdays. The Tuesday release dates are publishers that are centered in the US, and the Thursday release dates are publishers that are in the UK because they have different release days. So this one, February 5th, A Visitation of Spirits. In this book, we're following our main character, Horace, who is a 16-year-old Black young man who is living in a small town, and he knows that he is gay, right? He knows that he's attracted to men, but doesn't really understand how he can show that part of himself to his community. So he starts to perceive his internal monologue as demons and angels that are sort of having this internal conversation, very much in the vein of having an angel and a devil on your shoulder. And he reaches out to his uncle Jimmy, who is a local reverend. And Jimmy, dealing with his own stuff, does not really understand how to navigate what's happening with Horace. And I think we go from there. It's pretty vague blurb, but it sounds really good. So I'm definitely interested. So that is A Visitation of Spirits. Next up, we have a book from Clash books, which I don't know if I've ever read a Clash book before. I own one, but I have not read from them before. But there were a couple of things I was really interested in. They mainly do horror related things. So if you like horror, really subversive horror, they might be a good independent publisher for you. This one is called Of Beasts. It's by M. Jane Worma, coming out on February 10th. And I'm just going to read you the one-line blurb because I think it's enough for this book. It says, in this queer horror novel debut, a priest falls in love with the Antichrist, and even God can't stop the horror it will bring. Doesn't that sound so good? Now, the one thing I am concerned with this is I don't like anything that falls into the extreme horror genre. I don't know that this does. The rest of the blurb does sound like pretty gory. So I will just put that out there. Again, like it doesn't say it's extreme horror, but this has a gorier blurb than I would normally read. I'm slightly concerned about that, but if that's not a major concern for you, maybe this will be a really good fit if that blurb sounds interesting, which how could it not? But yeah, this might be one that I try to get from the library just if I need to put it down because it's too violent, then that's okay for me. But Of Beasts, also really cool cover as well. I love purple. I'm hoping we're gonna get more purple books this year. I feel like purple is always an underrepresented color in books. So love the cover. So that is Of Beasts. Next up, we have another McNally book. I said there was going to be more coming. This one is Beloved Son Felix, Coming of Age in the Renaissance by Felix Platter. And it's translated by Sean Genet. I'm assuming it's translated from the French. Is this translated from the French? The author is Swiss, but he moves to France early on. So I'm not quite sure, it doesn't say. And this is a diary of the author. So the author in 1552, when he was 16 years old, moved from Switzerland to France in order to become a physician. And in that 5 years, he writes everything down and keeps a journal, a diary. And I am so intrigued to read this. I love hyper specific history. That's the type of history that I am more often interested in. So I'm really excited to read these entries. This is also during the time of the bubonic plague. So I'm assuming that's going to feature in his work as a physician. And it's not only about him being a physician, it is also just about his daily life. So he is a Protestant who's moving to a Catholic nation at the time. So I'm sure that will also feature, but I'm just really, really excited. For me, I just can't fathom that like we get to have a diary like this from that long ago. Can't wait for this to come out. So excited, so excited. So that is Beloved Son Felix. Next up, we have another Clash books, and that is Lover Girl. This is by Nicole Sellew, and it's expected to be released on February 24th. Another debut book from Clash. And this one follows our main character, who I believe is unnamed. I always think that's an interesting choice when an author does that. And it's fun to kind of think about why that might have been the choice that the author wanted to make for this book. So we're following her at the end of summer. Her very wealthy friend, Lucas, has offered to house her in their like neglected mansion that they have in the Hamptons, I believe. And for him, he sees that as an act of generosity. And for her, that comes with lots of blurry expectations. So I think we're kind of getting some messiness from there, but I'll give you the blurb at the bottom that kind of speaks to some of the themes and what the book is grappling with. It says, Lover Girl is a lesson in the schooled indifference and the complicated dynamics of the super privileged and the meaning of real love as a 21st century girl. Ugh, buzzwords for me. I'm gonna eat that up. So really excited for Lover Girl. Also highly enjoy that cover. So that one's coming out February 24th. Next up, we're back to Catapult with a release coming out on March 3rd. So we've entered the March books, and this is The Disappointment by Scott Broker. This one is another queer book. I'm starting to realize now that I'm talking about them all in order how many queer books there are, which amazing. So this one is following a couple who are about to take a trip to the Oregon coast to try and like reconnect, rebuild some romance. And the night before their much needed vacation, Jack catches his husband packing an urn. His mother's ashes are in that urn. He wants to take her with him. They had previously agreed that there were going to be no parents on this trip, dead or alive, but it seems that Randy cannot leave home without his mother and has been taking his mother everywhere with him since she passed away. Already an intriguing premise. Then we go to the Oregon coast and there's supposed to be this like wide cast of characters that are very like surreal neighbors in the house that they're staying in. And it's like weird shit going down with all the neighbors. So it says there's an overly dedicated method actor. There's a child environmentalist who might be able to communicate with the dead, and more and more and more. So intriguing, really excited. Catapult does like very fun, wacky literary fiction, but I think they are an independent publisher that more straddles this like commercial versus literary line. And this one sounds like it's gonna kind of be up that alley. So that is The Disappointment. And now we have our first other press book in this video. It's coming out on March 3rd as well. And this is Konfidenz, but spelled as you can see in the picture. This is by Ariel Dorfman, and I have another Ariel Dorfman book that I wanted to pick up last year. I think it was last year, but I have not gotten to it yet. So she's definitely an author that I'm interested in, and this one is no different. The one from last year is called Allegro. This one is based, or I guess taking inspiration from the political coup in 1973 to overthrow the Chilean President Salvador Allende. So I don't know how like loose or directly inspired it's gonna be by that, but that is something to know about this. And this one, I'm just gonna read directly from the blurb because it's kind of crazy, but the blurb does it very succinctly. So I'm gonna read it. A woman travels to Paris to meet her lover. When she arrives at her hotel, however, she receives a call from a mysterious stranger claiming to be his friend, who somehow possesses intimate knowledge of their lives and why she fled her homeland. Over the course of 9 hours, this man will draw her in, revealing details about her lover's work, which could put him in grave danger, and the growing conflict that has ensnared them all. So it's got like kind of a psychological, tense vibe to it. And because I know it's inspired by the coup, I'm assuming that there's gonna be like a political bent, and that's the dangerous element, that he's somehow like involved in the coup or something like that. That's again just a guess, it doesn't say in the blurb, but yeah, this one sounds very interesting, very propulsive to me, and again, it's an author that I have been interested in before, so I want to try and get to her at some point. Maybe this will be the year. Next up, we're back to McNally with An Awfully Big Adventure. This is by Beryl Bainbridge, and it's coming out on March 10th. It does have a foreword by Yi-Yun Lee, if you're interested in that. And this book is, it says it's a Blackley comic story that is following a theater troupe, which I always think is kind of fun, who are putting on a post-war production of Peter Pan. And it's just about the shenanigans that are happening with the cast during the rehearsals and the production. It's supposed to be funny, it's supposed to be tragic at the same time. I really like when books kind of balance those well. And I think at the center of this, there is kind of like a romantic connection between two of the actors, like the leading man and the leading lady, and that kind of causes shenanigans from there. So I'm excited. This one sounds fun. I'm here for it. So that is An Awfully Big Adventure. Then we're heading over to other press again with Of Loss and Lavender by Sinan and Antoon. This one's coming out on March 17th. And this one follows two separate storylines that I think as the book progresses, they start to converge, which I can really enjoy. We're following two different Iraqi men. The first one, Sami, I'm gonna guess, S-A-M-I, Sami, is a retired doctor. He's living in Brooklyn, has kids, grandchildren, and it starts to become clear that he's starting to lose his memory, which I'm assuming harkens back to the title and why they're using the word lavender, because that color is often associated with dementia. So he starts kind of like sinking back into memories of life in Iraq before the war. And then we have Omar, who is living in the US. He's had to flee from Baghdad and he's living in the US under a fake identity. And when he was fleeing, he was labeled as a deserter, so he had his ear cut off. And for him, that's like extreme mark of shame that he lives with every day. And he is dreaming of being able to get reconstructive surgery for his ear. So very separate lives, it appears from the blurb. But again, we know they converge. So I'll be very interested to see how that comes together. Yeah, this one sounds really fascinating, and it does interest me that it's centering two Iraqi men, because I feel like it's a character perspective that we don't often get a lot of in the US at least. So I'm very much interested for that one of Loss and Lavender. Next up, we're going to Grey Wolf with The Spoil. This is by Maile Chapman. And this one is supposed to be a psychological horror book, which I feel like there's a lot of horror in this list as well. Something's just going on in my brain right now that I'm finding that interesting to read. It's coming out on March 17th. And this one has two different timelines. So the first timeline is in the 70s, and there's a young girl who's living in a house in Tacoma, which I live in Washington. So there's a personal connection there that I think is interesting when you're reading about a place that you're very familiar with. And she is very preoccupied with anomalous phenomena, which I do think is a good way to put the wide swath of things that she's interested in. So think like aliens, ESP, Bermuda Triangle, right? Like all that type of stuff. And she is convinced that the crumbling townhouse they live in has a malevolent presence inside of it. Then we get a timeline in the future, modern day, of Mandy, who's living in Las Vegas. Now, you don't know from the blurb if Mandy is the young girl or not, but Mandy is living in a very modern home in Las Vegas. She's taking care of her mother who has Alzheimer's. And as she's going through her mother's stuff one day, she releases a demon accidentally who takes possession of her handyman neighbor. Now, just what? Like, I have no idea what's going on. I want to know what's going on. So that one sounds very interesting to me. So that is The Spoil. Also has a fly on the cover, which I think, why is that the cover image? I don't know, but I'm curious. The Spoil. Are you interested in that? Let me know. Next up, we have, I believe, a Europa book. Let me just check. Yes, this is a Europa book. And it's called A Mask the Color of the Sky by Bassem Khandaqji. I'm going to go with Bassem Khandaqji, but once I read it, I will look up the pronunciation. This one is expecting to be published on March 17th. Now, with Europa, it really is expecting because Europa doesn't publish specific release dates on their website. So I have to go off of what other sites are saying. So truly expected March 17th. And this is a Palestinian author, so I'm always trying to read more Palestinian voices. We're following Noor, who is a young Palestinian refugee who looks and can pass as Jewish. And one day he discovers an Israeli ID card and assumes that person's false identity. This allows him to finally get work. He has a degree in archaeology and he gets a job on an archaeological dig where he's passing as an Israeli. And it all of a sudden lets him into this world that has been off limits to him and puts him in close proximity to people whose lives and beliefs have always seen him as an enemy. So I think it's such an interesting premise and setup for a book, and I really want to make sure I get to it. I think the themes in this are talking about like desire to belong, the toll of being under occupation, that type of stuff. So very excited for this one to come out. So that is A Mask the Color of the Sky. I also think the cover is really unique and beautiful for that one as well. Then we're going back to Dead Ink Books with The Cipher by Kathe Koja. This one's getting published on March 19th. This one is another horror book that I believe is a re-release. I think it came out in the 90s. I think early 90s. And won a ton of awards at the time. Now it's getting re-released. And in this one, we're following Nicholas, who is a video store clerk. And all of a sudden, this giant black hole appears in their storage room, and one of his coworkers is very fascinated by the black hole and starts to like put objects through it to see what happens and like starts running these experiments. Meanwhile, Nicholas is becoming more and more obsessed with it, and he feels like the black hole is calling out to him constantly. And it says it starts him on a journey of obsession through its soothing, blank darkness into the blinding core of terror. So very intrigued. That is the Cipher from Dead Ink. Then we're going back to Europa with Madelaine Before the Dawn. This is by Sandrine Colette and translated from the French by Alison Anderson. I've read a lot of I always say Alison Anderson when I say her name. I have read a lot of Alison Anderson before, and I think she's a phenomenal translator. This one is expected to come out on March 31st. All right, I'm readjusted because I had a neighbor knock on my door and I had to chat with them really quick. Okay, so in Madelaine Before the Dawn, we are falling from the perspective of a young boy named Bran, but the story doesn't really start with him. So we're gonna back up for a second. So the story starts with these two twin sisters, Alice and Ambre. Not sure how to pronounce their names. They're French. I am horrible at pronouncing French. And both of these twin sisters are born with like this otherworldly beauty. And we don't know the exact time that this is set, but it seems to be set in a time in which lords rule over like more common folk. Ambre, one of the sisters, is childless, and she adopts this kind of like foundling girl that is very different. She does not fit the social norms of the time for women. Like, she's very brave, she's very fearless, she's brilliant, she's strong and defiant. So she decides that one day, kind of in protest to the merciless lords that they're living under, she slaughters a stag, and that starts to like set off this underground rebellion. Then we get Bran, who is the narrator of the story. So Bran is a boy who is the same age of Madelaine, the girl who slaughters the stag, and we're getting his perspective of Madelaine, which is very complex and confusing because he's both in awe of her and afraid of her. And this book is supposed to be about revolt and resilience at the edge of civilization. Sounds so good. I feel like the cover does not match the blurb. Again, I haven't read it, so maybe the cover matches the full story, but the cover for me is like not giving anything. How do you feel about that? But definitely interested for the premise. So Madelaine Before the Dawn. Then we're gonna head over to Other Press again with a nonfiction book. This is Still Life. The subtitle is 10 Crime Stories by Malin Persson Giolito, translated by Rachel Willson-Broyles. Okay, it's Swedish. And it says, 10 sharp yet deeply human stories show how people from all walks of life can end up on the wrong side of the law, regardless of their intentions. And I'll preface this by saying, I don't normally read, listen, or consume a lot of media about crime. So I feel like it has to be doing something like unique in that space for me to want to read it. And I do feel like this one is. Again, it's a short story collection. So I'll read you some of the one-liners from the short stories themselves, and then I'll talk a little bit about the themes and why I'm interested in it. So the one-liners, it says, a police officer fresh out of the academy becomes acutely aware of the deadly consequences of prejudice and how biases color our actions, leading us to justify faulty choices. A teenager has lost her voice and resorts to violence to get heard, even against those she loves. A university student breaks the law on a night of youthful revelry, which soon has fatal consequences that plunge those involved into an abyss of remorse. There's a few other ones, but I'll just read those three for now. And then I'll read you sort of the last sentence that is what sold me on wanting to read this. It says, she, the author, delivers a poignant portrayal of societal failure, vividly illustrating that actions driven by good intentions may still be considered criminal in the eyes of the law, underscoring that the legal system doesn't always shield those who need protection the most. And this is the type of crime fiction that I'm interested in, where we're talking about like the systemic influences on crime, the types of crimes that are being committed, the types of people that are being convicted of those crimes. And I feel like that's a missing piece to a lot of the like crime media that we consume at this point in time. So really interested for this one. That is Still Life. Next up, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more to go. My Lord. Okay, next up we have a book from New Directions, so press we haven't mentioned before in this video, and that is City of Rats by Kopi. This is also getting published on March 31st. And let me just give you the one-liner that gives comps for this. It says, "The Holy Mountain meets Ratatouille in this X-rated fable by French provocateur Kopi." And this one's translated from the French by Kit Schluter. Cover, love. So intrigued. And this is following rats. It's following Parisian rats, wide community of them that are all written in letters, presumably in a rat language that is then being translated for us to understand. And there's a whole rat society infrastructure that's happening. And one of the main rats that we're following, Jory, I'm not sure how to pronounce the rat's name. Jory, again, I'm so bad at French, I'm sorry. And he finds himself in prison, rat prison, because he's suspected of a double homicide in his rat society. Like, what? Like, it just sounds crazy, and I feel like I just have to know. Also, this author, I believe, is known for writing very, very short fiction. I'm not sure if this is short or not. It doesn't give me a page count. Yeah, it doesn't give me the page length. Yeah, I've never read from this author before, but I'm really excited. And it just sounds crazy. And it says, whimsical, smutty, and surprisingly profound. City of Rats will leave no reader unscathed and every reader awestruck. Like, what? I just have no idea, and I have to know. I truly have to know. So I definitely want to pick this one up. That is City of Rats. That's exactly the type of like wacky shit that New Directions would publish, and I love them for that. Back to other press. I told you there was a lot. There's still going to be another one too. We have Mount Verity. This is by Therese Bowman, translated by Marlene Delergy. I have really been interested in reading Therese Bowman. Other press has translated many of her novels, and I haven't gotten one before, but I've been really interested in other ones. She tends to write literary thrillers or like literary mysteries, and this one sounds very good, and honestly, the cover is spectacular. Sometimes I don't like her covers. This one I really, really enjoy. And this author is Swedish. This one's coming out on April 7th. So we're finally in the April books. This novel is specifically talking about survivor's guilt. There's, again, 2 timelines going on in this novel. First timeline is in 1989 when Hannah's older brother Eric and some friends go to this infamous Mount Verity, as is the title. And there is a legend about a cave that is in that mountain, that it was during the witch trials in Östergötland during the 17th century. And the legend goes that whoever goes there and doesn't tell the truth disappears. Eric disappears and is never to be seen again. So then we get a more present day timeline that follows Hannah. It says that we're meeting her as she's starting to grapple with all these questions related to Eric's disappearance. So I'm going to read you the questions because I feel like that gets to some of the like survivor's guilt themes that are going on in this book. So it says, what justice decided that she was allowed to live when Eric vanished? What is there left to believe in when the worst has happened? And can the story of Mount Verity be more than just a fable? I'm intrigued. I am intrigued. It also says it's very atmospheric and dreamy, so I'm here for it. That might be a really good winter book for me, like fall winter book. Okay, now we're going over to $2 Radio with Daycare, which is a short story collection by Nora Lange. Unclear. It's getting published on April 7th. And Nora's debut novel, Us Fools, I've heard great things about, mainly from Sara from Eyes on Indie, and I do really want to read it, but I'm probably going to get to this one first if I had to guess. So I'll read you some of the one-liners from the story. So first one says, Carol and David arrive late to a Boston dinner party for a night of messy socializing with other couples, including a former cult leader turned financial advisor. Another story is about an expatriate living in Istanbul who's called away from her daily life with the husband and the friend who wanted more than friendship to visit her mother, who notoriously makes bad decisions, who has just arrived in Greece with news for her daughter. In a third story, two figurines live out their dreams before succumbing to the truth that they have been assembled inside a snow globe and will never go anywhere. And there's a couple more, but intriguing enough. I love those like surrealist short story collections that are just kind of like very wacky setups that allow a lot of like fun, playful space with themes that you wouldn't be able to do in something that is more like slice of life. So very intrigued and looking forward to that short story collection. Next up, we have the next edition of the best literary translations of 2026. This is an anthology that Deep Vellum has started producing every year. I have the previous two. They started it in 2024. I have not read them, but I am hoping to rectify that in this coming year. So this is the 2026 edition. It has a slew of editors. They always have a handful of editors. This one does in fact have 5. It's coming out on April 14th, and I have no idea what's going to be in this collection, but this is an anthology series that I collect, so I will be buying it regardless. And again, it's an anthology, so we're probably going to get a wide variety of things anyway. If you also are interested in this series, just know it is coming. And these contain translations from all over the world, all different languages, which I think is a really strong selling point for these. So yeah, 2026 one coming out. All right, next up we have Don't Stop by Bonnie Friedman. This is published by Europa Editions, expected to be published on April 21st. This is the penultimate anticipated release for this video, so we're so close to the end. We are following Ina, a 41-year-old scholar who is on the cusp of professional success. Her life appears to be perfect, very enviable, and yet she decides that one day she has a very impulsive kiss with a stranger, and that starts to send her into an emotional free fall. She justifies the kiss by saying that it's a part of her research for the project that she's currently working on. But really, it upends her entire life, and she starts thinking like through all of these choices that she's made for her life and starts to find a better understanding of who she actually is. I think that premise is great. That I love books where the character makes some impulsive decision and then that kind of like sets off this chaotic course of events that helps them have a better understanding of who they are. Like that quintessential scenario of someone blowing up their life all of a sudden, always very interesting. So I will be curious to see how this one plays that out. So that is Don't Stop. Never heard or read from that author before. And then the last book that I have to talk to you about today is a nonfiction. It's When the World Sleeps: Stories, Words, and Wounds of Palestine by Francesca Albanese, translated by Gregory Conti. There is not a cover released for this yet, so I'll just put up the temporary one that they have. This author, who is Italian, by the way, so it's not a Palestinian author, I want to be upfront about that, is the first woman to serve as the United Nations reporter for occupied Palestine, for the occupied Palestinian territory. And in this, she is giving 10 stories of her time there. And the blurb does list this as like the author is reporting testimonials of Palestinian people. It's like kind of vague. I'm not really sure what that means. That's definitely not saying like she is outright just like doing interviews and just publishing the interviews. That leads me to believe that, you know, she is sort of like curating the stories. So yeah, I'm hoping this will be really well done. Curious to see how the representation is, but yeah, it's not an own voices novel. So please do still keep reading and viewing media from actual Palestinians, but I'm curious to see what this one is like. And that one is coming out on April 28th. So those are the 24 books. We have made it through 24 releases from January through the end of March in 2026. Please let me know if you are interested in any of these books. And hopefully this puts some books on your radar that you might be interested to read from independent presses. So that's always a lovely thing as well. Thanks for being here. Thanks for making it to the end. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.